We recently had a request in our comments section asking me how I set up my palette, and also asking how do you decide what colors to use for choosing a palette for painting. Well, I can't show all that in one quick tip, but I'll devote this quick tip to showing you how I set up my palette. My palette has been in the state of evolving for the past, I probably won't tell you how many years, but it changes according to where my focus is. And there are two things that I have narrowed down, or two things I've been focused on when narrowing down my palette. One is to get my palette down to as few colors as possible to give me the broadest range of colors. That's been very important. And also using colors that are light fast, that are permanent, that are not going to fade as time goes on. So I set my palette up according to the color wheel. And this is whether I'm working with an oil palette or a watercolor palette or pastels palette, because I think by the color wheel. And also on my oil painting palette, I do something that Richard Schmid does, and few other artists, but a lot of oil painters don't do this. And that is, I leave paint on the palette. I'll let it dry after I've finished a painting, and I just leave it on the palette so I can always have reference there to my full palette of colors. It helps me to think, and it's sort of like having a whole orchestra of colors available, just like we do with our watercolor palettes. So that's one key. If you work on a palette such as a permanent palette such as this, that might be something you want to consider. But let's just look at how we set it up, how I set the palette up. Now, if I want the full range of colors to work from, so this is the palette always available to me at any time I'm painting. So of course I start with the white. Now I have a large area of white. This is the Gamlin titanium white. And I always have a large area of white because I use more white than any other color. So that's where it starts. And we couldn't say that the white's on the color wheel because it's not, but that's where the whole thing starts. From white, sitting next to white, I have yellow. And you see on the color wheel here, yellow is the lightest and warmest color we have. And I use the Utrecht Hansa Yellow Light for my yellow. I don't have a warm yellow and a cool yellow like a lot of artists do. Like some will have lemon yellow or cadmium lemon and then cadmium yellow. Well, I know that I can warm or cool the colors, the yellow with other colors and with white, and so I don't have that variety. It helps me to cut down on the economy by having just this one yellow. The next color, or next two colors I should say, are in the yellow-orange range. You see I'm moving around on the color wheel here. Now this one is the Rembrandt Yellow Ochre Light. I'm not sure I really need it on the palette. I'm in the questioning mode right now about this one because I can make that color by using other colors that are on the palette. But sometimes I need that neutralized yellow. And it's easier or more convenient to reach for the neutralized yellow that leans more towards yellow-orange than it is to stop and mix it. So that's why I have that one still on the palette. The next color, as you can see, comes around the color wheel, still yellow-orange, is the Rembrandt Cadmium Yellow Deep. Now that's a color I use an awful lot, and I love having that. Ability to have that brilliant yellow-orange. The next one, see coming right on around, is the next one on my palette is actually a red-orange. Now I don't need an orange on the palette because I have the ability to quickly make it orange with the color I'm going to talk about in just a moment, and this cadmium yellow deep. So I don't have to have a tube orange on the palette, but I do find this color. This is the Rembrandt transparent oxide red. Very useful color to have because it can do so many things when mixed in with the other colors. It's just one of the most versatile colors that I have ever had on my palette. And so it falls right here though on the palette because it is a yellow orange. And so as I said, I set the palette up according to the color wheel, and red orange, I'm sorry, more red orange. So I set the palette up to the color according to the color wheel, so my red orange appears here no matter how dark or how light. I just go by the color wheel. The next color set up here is the cadmium red orange, cadmium red light by Dianne. And this is a red that's a little bit on the orange side, but it's when mixed with the cadmium yellow deep, makes a beautiful orange. And put a little bit of alizarin crimson in it, it makes a wonderful red. So I find that cadmium red light, another color I use from time to time. I might switch from cadmium red light to cadmium scarlet, still in the Gamlin brand. But they're so close together, it hardly makes any difference. So then moving on around the color wheel, I go next. Well, the red violet. Now this is working in the reds is where it gets kind of risky, because if you're working like red flowers, pink flowers, and things like that, then this palette's not going to give it to me. So there are two other colors I want to talk about before I go into the permanent alizarin. And those are quinacridone violet, which is a red violet, and quinacridone rose. And both of these are made by Utrecht. But these are nice, bright, pure red violet or pink type colors, transparent, that are very helpful when I'm trying to get the pinks that you find in flowers, the pinks and the reds and the red violets that you often find in the flowers that you cannot get with alizarin crimson, or with a mixture of alizarin crimson and the cadmium colors. So those I don't put on the palette here permanently, but I keep them nearby if I need them in translating those colors. The next one that's actually on the palette falls also in the red violet range, and that is the Utrecht permanent alizarin crimson. It leans a little bit towards violet, and considered a little bit more towards red violet than it is red. And then coming on around the color wheel, my next color is a violet. Now we also call violet purple. And this is the Gamlin dioxazine purple. It lives right here in my palette line of colors. And it has it serves to make a red violet with alizarin crimson when I don't need that red violet to be a high chroma red violet. Of course, the next color is one of my workhorse colors, this one, and that is the blue. Of course, you can make blue violet, this one, by adding the violet and blue together. So I don't need a blue violet, but the Gamlin ultramarine blue is my workhorse for blue. And it lives right here on my palette. Now, a lot of people prefer cobalt blue, and I do have cobalt blue that I use on occasions, but I find the ultramarine blue serves me much better because of its it is so dark, it has that depth, and it has that transparency that cobalt blue doesn't have. Now I can make cobalt blue by adding white to this and just a little touch of another color, depending on whatever's on the palette. The next one, which is really a workhorse, one of my very favorite tube colors to work with is the Rembrandt Viridian, and that is a blue-green, falls right here and lives right here on my palette. And the blue-green, this is a very dark, this is not just Viridian. So I said Rembrandt. I don't know of any other brand that makes this rich, deep, transparent green. But you can see it right here, how rich and deep and transparent it is, whereas most Viridians end up being sort of milky in middle value. Now, it doesn't work very well just by adding white to it and using it straight out of the tube. It's really lousy. It's an ugly color when you do that. But when mixed with other colors, it does wonders, especially when mixed with the transparent oxide red. You can get all sorts of, from spring greens over to kind of pre-fall greens, deep summer greens, and like that. And well, almost any color, it will mix with almost anything on the palette and produce something wonderful. So that's one of my workhorses. And the last color on my palette is a yellow green, and it's probably not going to live on my palette very long because I found that it's called the Daniel Smith Set Green, It's the only sap green I know of that is light fast, which is one I've been using the Daniel Smith brand of that. But I found that I can get the same color of sap green when I mix Viridian and transparent oxide red, and so that's why it's getting used on my palette less and less and less, and it's probably going to go. So right now there are 10 cube colors on my palette, plus the titanium white, and it's likely that within the near future there will be 9 and possibly 8 if I decide to delete the sap green or the yellow ochre light. So you see how my palette works. If we had done this 5 years ago, there would have been about 15 colors on the palette. So my palette gets narrowed down more and more and more as time passes, and as I learn more and more about what colors will do and how they interact with each other. So if you like this quick tip, and if you have something that you would like for me to explore or to explain or to demonstrate, drop a comment right down below here and let us know, and we'll be happy to put it on the schedule. And also we have a number of video tutorials that are an hour long, at least an hour, right around an hour long, each focused on a single subject, and there's more than 100 there at DianneMinds.com. Also, I want to tell you about if you like this palette, you can go to DianneMinds.com. If you'd like to see a diagram of the palette explained pretty much as I explained it to you here, go to DianneMinds.com. In the menu section, click on free stuff, and this cursor down and you'll find Dianne's palette. Click on that. It's free. You can have it, and perhaps that might serve as a guide that you might want to try. So there's your quick tip.